Hi everybody, this is an ongoing series examining the dungeon design in Zelda games. We've already taken a look at all of Ocarina of Time's dungeons, so go check that out if you'd like. Otherwise, let's hop into Majora's Mask. Oh boy, there is a lot to do before this next dungeon. Keep in mind that the game has only 4 main dungeons, so as far as how it paces out the progression, there's a lot of side content as well as pre-dungeon stuff to take on here. Tattle will tell us that we can get to Great Bay by heading west, but there's a gate blocking the path. So here's what we need to do. First off, though it's optional, I do recommend getting the Gilded Sword. You can do so by first ensuring spring is on the mountain on the first day and completing the Goron races to win an empty bottle of gold dust. You can take your Kokiri sword to the mountain smithy to be upgraded. It takes until the next morning to be upgraded, which is why we need to do this on the first day. Pay 100 rupees to first upgrade it to the Razor Sword, and then give them the gold dust to further upgrade it a second time to the Gilded Sword. Okay, so by way of doing that, you should also be able to unlock use of the powder keg by talking to this big guy. Once you've got the powder keg, you can open the path to Romani Ranch early. You'll want to make it there for the first day. You only have to be there to learn Epona's song from Romani, which is weird because you should already know it, but whatever. But while you're here, you may as well do the Alien Invasion side quest on the first night, and the Defending the Wagon side quest on the second night. Now that we have Epona, we can jump that fence. I do sort of feel bad that your faithful steed is relegated to basically just being here to jump some fences, and that's it. As far as fast travel goes, there are far more warp points here than in Ocarina of Time, and even still, Goron rolling is faster and more convenient than calling Epona. But hey, at least Epona is here in some capacity. Okay, we can now enter the Great Bay Coast area. Great Bay is one of my favorite regions in Termina, but when we first arrive here, it has a very dreary, dreadful atmosphere going on. The cursed theme music that I mentioned in the previous video gets its reinstrumentation here again, giving us some strings, what sounds to me like a distorted synth organ, and wonderful steel pan drums, which are one of my favorite instruments, by the way. And wait, is that a theremin? Honestly, this may be the best rendition of the Cursed theme yet. Its instrumentation captures the tropical coastline perfectly, but the song itself is still deeply infused with that eerie, ever-present sense of dread. And to add to that sense of eerie dread, this happens. Tattle points out the seagulls doing this vulture dance around something out in the water. We can swim over to find a Zora floating here. He asks that you help get him to shore. Once you carry him back, he'll start to get up and walk, but he'll be too weak to go on and collapse on the ground. This is Mikau, the center of so much tragedy. He uses his last bit of strength to tell you his story, in song form. He's in the band, the Indiegogos, the very same band whose posters you've been seeing plastered all around Clocktown. Except the singer of the band, Lulu, recently laid some eggs. The eggs were stolen by pirates, and Lulu has gone into a silent depression since then. Mikau had tried to stop them, but was mortally wounded and left for dead in the ocean. He begs of you, somebody, please rescue her eggs before the pirates take their toll. Somebody, please heal my soul. Then he collapses on the ground, basically on the brink of death. Just like with Darmani, we'll play him the Song of Healing. Mikau will see a vision of him and Lulu and the rest of their band as they walk together, and Mikau passes on, leaving behind the Zora mask. His spirit is able to find peace in the afterlife on the condition that you finish what he started. Then Link will give him a proper grave and funeral in one of the most underappreciated moments in the series. No dialogue, just this moment of silence. As tragic as this all is, it opens the gate for us to take on Zora form, which is my absolute favorite of these transformations because boy can we swim. Water levels and swimming in Zelda games is usually kind of sluggish. Swimming just isn't usually one of Link's strong suits, and that's okay. But Zora's can swim, and this game does that justice. The Zora mask takes what was difficult about water physics in other Zelda games and makes it just so much fun. Swimming is fast, precise, freeing, and just fun! The Zora mask is like the boomerang, blue tunic, and iron boots from Ocarina of Time all rolled into one. It lets you sink, walk, and breathe underwater in addition to this awesome swimming. But even better, Zora Link can actually do combat underwater instead of being limited to just the hookshot, and his combat is just as fluid on the ground as it is underwater. It's fantastic. No more pausing constantly to switch to iron boots, no more whatever doggy paddle swimming this is. As Zora Link, we are free in the water, except that they absolutely butchered it in the 3DS remake and made it absolutely terrible and dreadful and ruined a perfectly good thing by making some magic clouds super quickly and making these awful space. Anyways, we need to get those eggs. By now, you should have at least 2, but probably 3 empty bottles. You can get by with that to start with. First is finding a way into the pirates' fortress. While their gates are closed, you can find a secret entrance underwater. You'll need to sneak around the fortress to find the eggs. Now, if stealth isn't your forte, then you can head over towards Icana Canyon and get the stone mask from Shiro, which will make it so that the pirates won't notice you. Though just like in Ocarina of Time, you can also snipe them with your bow to, knock them unconscious. Yeah, they're okay. Totally not dead, just knocked out. First place I recommend is climbing to the central tower and heading through this door, where you'll see a cutscene of the Gerudo pirates talking about somehow trying to use the eggs to get to Great Bay Temple. You can shoot an arrow through the bars and drop some wasps into their room. Then you can sneak into there and grab yourself the contents of this treasure chest. And it's the hookshot. Oh, I love the hookshot. The first of these 7 missing eggs is also in this room. At this point, I usually suggest backtracking out of the fortress to use the hookshot to get to the top of this waterfall so you can do the beaver races. It's optional, but doing so you can get both a heart piece and another empty bottle. You have to race these guys 4 times total if you want to get both prizes, which would be a gripe if it weren't just so fun to do these races as Zora Link, because swimming is so great! Or it should be. Okay, back in the Pirate's Fortress. There's 3 more eggs to find here, each of which you will get after a battle with one of these Gerudo warriors. Just make sure to take a pictograph of any one of the pirates while you're here, but more on that later. Once you've got all the eggs from in here, drop the kids off in the tank at the Marine Research Lab and bring that pictograph to the fisherman's hut. He's a perv, I guess, because he'll trade you the picture for this rare seahorse. What were you planning to do with that picture? You can bring that seahorse back to its home, a pinnacle rock out at sea. He'll show you how to navigate through the murky waters to get to this huge pit where we can battle the sea serpents and live out our Mario 64 nightmares. The last 3 eggs are found down here. Also, we rescue the other seahorse and they're in love and it's just wholesome. Okay, with all the eggs rescued, they'll only hatch if they're all together, so we'll drop off the rest here at the lab. These little baby Zoras will hatch and conveniently arrange themselves to form sheet music. Yes, these little dudes are teaching us the new wave bossa nova. Now we can play the song for Lulu, which restores her voice, but also seems to awaken something in the water. This is the giant turtle. He's some sort of patron deity of this ocean, and is our only safe passage to Great Bay Temple, since the murky water will prevent us from simply swimming there. You can hookshot over to his back, and he'll take us right into the dungeon. I mentioned last time that many people seem to compare this dungeon to Ocarina of Time's Water Temple. While I think I made a solid case for Snowhead actually being a more apt comparison in regards to its structure and progression, I can still see how people would draw the comparison. For one thing, water, and hookshot. I think the main reason, however, is that people just find this dungeon to be pretty confusing. This dungeon is also the temple that feels the least like, well, a temple. It has a striking industrial feel, with hazard lights along the edges of these platforms, bolted metal, pipes, and machines all throughout it. I've seen some theories online that suggest that the whole temple is like a giant water filtration system for Great Bay, which would make sense then that if something were up here in the temple, that the waters of Great Bay would start becoming murky. As we progress through the dungeon, we have to open these systems up to allow water to flow through the pipes again, turning this filtration system back on. I don't know if this was Nintendo's intention while designing the dungeon, but it seems like a pretty spot-on theory to me. Aside from the striking industrial theme here, as previously mentioned, this dungeon is somewhat notorious for its difficulty, a sentiment I personally don't share. The Water Temple and Snowhead had navigation being its biggest challenges. They force you to adjust and crisscross a central room constantly. While Great Bay Temple does still make use of an important central room that does need alteration, if you know what you're doing, you'll spend a lot less time in this room and a lot less time in the dungeon overall. The reason being, the temple is simply divided in two halves, which are accessible by changing the direction of the water current. If you're getting lost or stuck, however, I have a very easy way to stay on track. Follow the pipes. There are color-coded doorways and pipes that weave in and out of the rooms and corridors. Since our main goal is restoring the flow of water, simply going with the flow and following along the pipelines, in particular the pipes that are active, will make progressing through this dungeon an absolute breeze. The dungeon also sports some of the coolest puzzles and challenges in my opinion, but we'll get back to that soon. Oh, and as always, there's 15 stray fairies to collect here once again. Speaking of that industrial theme, the music here really leans into that. The percussion has this distinctive metallic sound. Then there's this tapping synth sound, which I'll talk about more in a moment. Then the main synth section. I don't know if I can articulate how brilliant this part of the song is due to my lack of knowledge on musical theory, but listen to this section for yourself and tell me it doesn't make you just feel uneasy. If I had to try and describe this section, I'd say this. Growing up, I used to get motion sickness a lot, and that fading in and out of this section sounds almost like what's going on in my head as I try to steady myself while being horribly seasick. And given the flowing water currents that you keep getting caught in, and then having to swim quickly through all of these narrow corridors, yeah, I'd say our pal Koji Kondo really knocked it out of the park with this one. Last bits of the song are this oddly tranquil section. And finally, this weird bit of synth. It's fairly faint in the background of the song, but much like the synth tapping sound I mentioned before, it's actually the same synth used during the alien invasion at the ranch. Much like Woodfall and Snowhead, I feel like this is thrown in at the end of the track to just leave you with a lingering sense of danger. This song is not easy listening by any stretch, but it certainly achieves a particular atmosphere that fits this dungeon perfectly. When we first arrive at the temple, our giant turtle friend will drop us off here in the foyer, which is more like a docking bay. There's some barrels for supplies if you need, but make sure to light the torches for a stray fairy. The door here takes us right into this water wheel room. Tattle will draw your attention right away to the mechanisms here, which you can see that the wheel is powered by the water spraying upwards towards it from this yellow pipe. There are elevators on either side of the door here. To the left is a Skulltula with a stray fairy, and the main path to the right. However, we can't progress that way just yet. There's a spout here that needs to be spraying, so you can follow the pipe into the water and to the corresponding yellow valve. Once you turn it, the water flow will be restored. This is a concept we're going to be revisiting a lot throughout the dungeon, so keep that in mind. There's another yellow valve that attaches to the main spout powering the water wheel. Don't touch that yet, as it will shut off all of the mechanisms here, preventing you from progressing any farther. Okay, now jump across here and head down the hall into the main central room. Tattle will mention that the water wheel in the previous room seems to be what turns the turbine in this room, causing the water flow. For the time being, grab the stray fairy at this top platform and head down into the water. The current is pretty strong in this room, so it can be difficult to swim around in. There's a single pot at the bottom with another stray fairy, but otherwise there's two corridors branching off from here that we can access at this time. The water currents prevent us from entering the other two. This is another reason I don't find the dungeon to be as challenging as Snowhead. There aren't all that many paths to take. The central room is 3 stories high, with only 2 paths on each level. Both Snowhead and the Water Temple had way more branching paths off of their central rooms. Of those 2 paths we can enter, I suggest heading into the higher red one first. Following the corridor will take us into this room with a treasure chest and a door. These are, however, both out of reach for now, but remember them for later. Instead, continue following the current and through this next corridor, which will take us down the hallway where we can kill these Bio-Deku Babas for another stray fairy. Then head into the door. This next room has a few noteworthy things to nab. You'll be able to see the boss key taunting us from that balcony, but it's also out of reach. After fighting the Bio-Deku Babas, you can grab the key from the bottom of the water in this room, which is why we needed to come this way first. Next, grab the compass from the treasure chest on the upper ledge. Wait, the compass? Yeah, I always seem to find the compass before the map in this dungeon, which feels illegal, but oh well. There's another stray fairy hidden in here, and it's one of the most difficult ones to nab in the game. But one way to get it is by allowing yourself to get grabbed by these Dexy hands and just use your Zora shield, and they'll usually just swing you right into the fairy. If you duck down this corridor, the current should carry you right back into the central room. So now we can explore down the other corridor. The next room has some Octo Rocks and this red valve, which is out of reach. So instead, carefully follow along this red pipe, and you can spend that key we got on this locked door. There's a sort of break room with some supplies in it, and then we'll head into this room to fight the mid-boss. Not unlike Goma, the mid-boss won't immediately engage with us here. Instead, he'll hang on the ceiling until we make eye contact. This is Wart. You may recognize him if you have ever played A Link to the Past. His giant eyeball is his entire body, and his weak point, but he's surrounded by these bubbles. You can use your hookshot to pull the bubbles off and pop them with your sword. Or if you're feeling bold, you can just rush him with your sword and go totally ham on him. Once enough bubbles are gone, you should be able to make yourself an opening to shoot at his eye. The rest of the bubbles will drop off, so you can dispatch those easily. Next, he'll start ramming into the walls, so I suggest standing in a corner to give yourself a nice vantage point and sniping him with your bow when his eyes are open. A couple more shots and he'll go down, which earns us the dungeon item, Ice Arrows. Just like the fire arrows we got last time, I love having this as the dungeon item. They were even more underutilized in Ocarina of Time than the fire arrows, being completely optional in that game, so it's really great to see them take the spotlight here. They also get to be used not just for some cool combat, but the puzzles built around using these are really great. Alright, the Ice Arrows are put to good use right away. In the previous room, we can freeze one of these Octo Rocks to make ourselves a block to jump across, then you can turn this first red valve. You'll be able to see the water flow turn on and go through the red pipes. There's a path out back into the central room, and if we follow the flow along the red pipe, it'll take us back down the same path we went down before. However, there's plenty more we can do now that we have the Ice Arrows. First off, we can use them to create ice platforms to reach that treasure chest that was out of reach before, which contains the map, and I love this mechanic. It got seriously nerfed in the 3DS remake, where you're only able to freeze glowing points of water. But here, you can shoot any body of water to create an ice platform, which in some ways feels like a precursor to the Cryonis rune in Breath of the Wild. It's used really well in this dungeon too. Now we can reach that door from before, behind which is the next red valve. You can freeze the Choo Choo in here and climb on the ice block and up to the valve to turn it. With the water moving, let's follow the pipe some more and down the next corridor back into the room where we got the compass. We can now get to that out of reach balcony using Ice Arrows. Thaw out the door with fire arrows, and we'll find ourselves facing the next mid-boss. This may seem familiar. It's another gecko, but instead of a snapper like in Woodfall, he has these huge bubbles. First off, I suggest rushing him with your sword right away. He'll then retreat to the ceiling, pulling all of his bubbles up with him. What you'll want to do is shoot an ice arrow up at him while he's on the ceiling, which will cause him and his bubbles to crash down and shatter apart. This will leave him vulnerable to attack, so once again I suggest rushing him with your sword while he's down. Repeat this process a few times, and he'll be out. Frog? Okay, the next door should unlock, bringing us to that balcony where we obtain the boss key. Alright, we've got the map, compass, dungeon item, and boss key. Despite all of that, we are actually only halfway through the dungeon. We can shortcut back to the central room once again and head into the water wheel room. Since we turned the red valve, you'll see a new spout of water which we can hookshot over to and jump to the red valve. This will turn on another spout, but in order for the water wheel to change directions, we need to go down and shut off the yellow valve. Now heading into the central room, the flow of the water will be going in the opposite direction. While we're at the top of the central room, there's a quick stop to make. Since we have ice arrows, we can now freeze the water flowing from the ceiling at the top of the room, which was blocking this door. Through the door, we can use ice arrows to create a path over to this green valve and turn on the water flowing through the green pipes. There's a stray fairy hidden in the rafters at the top of this room as well, which you can find by creating ice platforms into this corner to line yourself up with the hookshot target on the ceiling. Back in the central room, with the water flowing the other way, we can now enter the other two corridors, which are color-coded as green. Just like before, we want to head into the higher green one first. This next room has another huge water wheel and the start of some really neat puzzle ideas. If you swim over to the ledge, there's an elevator you can ride up towards the huge water wheel. You'll want to use an ice arrow near the top to freeze the water from the ceiling, which will halt the water wheel because no water to push it. There's two stray fairies to find in this room. You can hookshot over to a treasure chest in an alcove near the top of the room for the first one. Nice and easy. The second one is a bit trickier. You'll want to head onto this platform along the wall, then use fire arrows to melt the ice and get the water wheel moving again. This will allow the platform to move along the wall, which should move it into position to hookshot to that torch in this second alcove. Once you've got both of those, you'll have to head back into the water, ride the elevator up again, and freeze the water to halt the water wheel. This will also have the effect of halting this giant paddle, which creates a nice bridge over to the next door. The next room has these seesaw type platforms, and the use of fire and ice arrows for this puzzle is really wonderful. Water will flow from the ceiling, pushing down a side of the platforms, so you need to be strategic with freezing and thawing out the water flow to create your path up to the next valve. I really adore this puzzle, and my only gripe here is that I would have liked to have seen this idea expanded upon even more, but I guess we can only make the dungeon so long before it gets repetitive. If you have some trouble with the puzzle, here's a quick tip. One side of each seesaw platform is decorated with this red outline, which will always be the side that you want to stand on when you raise it. There's 3 of these seesaw platforms, so you'll probably use a lot of magic power, but this room has you covered. On top of the usual crates and pots, there's 2 choo-choos who will continually respawn with magic and arrow pickups, so don't worry about running out. After you reach the valve, don't forget to follow along this pipe to nab another stray fairy in that treasure chest, as well as one hidden under the first seesaw platform. That first platform will also be used to reach the next door. This brings us back into the room where we found the map, but with the water flowing the other way, that path acts as a quick shortcut into the central room once again. Now there's only one path we haven't taken yet, which has a sole green pipe leading into it. The last 2 stray fairies are hidden in this room as well. Follow the pipe up and out of the water, and you can turn that final green valve, which activates this water spout and leads us to the boss door. Upon entering the boss room, we'll drop down this hole and down into the arena where the boss will immediately initiate the battle. This is Georg. Georg? George? He's a big ol' evil fish and he is ugly. This is probably one of the few cases where I don't mind the changes in the 3DS version. That is strictly from a visual standpoint. His concept art is freaking cool, but in-game, he just looks so janky. In the 3DS remake, they added this cool looking mask and really honed in on the details here. So I think he looks great. The fight here is pretty straightforward, and while it may be my least favorite of the main bosses in this game, I think it's still decently fun enough. As usual, the dungeon item is not needed, so save your magic power. Instead, you can snipe him from the main platform using normal arrows. This will stun him, allowing you to hop in the water as Zora Link and deal some damage. Or hey, if you're feeling bold, you can skip the arrow part and just try to face him head on. But that will most likely result in you just getting chewed up and spat out. Keep at this enough though, and he'll move on to the second phase of the battle, which is really just releasing his little minions to come after you. But they're almost no threat at all, so you can just keep at it with the same tactic of shooting him and going in as Zora Link. And yeah, we've got to address the 3DS remake, which just continues to disappoint me. Somehow, they took their mistake from the last boss fight, but did it in reverse. See, with Got, the whole fight in Goron form is all about keeping momentum during a high-speed chase. You are on the offensive, and you need to be fast to keep up with him, so halting your momentum to use your bow was an interruption that felt awkward. With Georg, the fight is on the opposite side. You're instead on the defensive, isolated on this platform while he tries to jump up at you and knock you into the water. So when you stun him and open him up for attack, dashing in to deal some damage and quickly retreating leads to a good flow of combat. There's no momentum to halt, so this isn't an interruption. Somehow they decided, rather than switching back and forth and weaving in and out of the water, that the fight would be better off if they segregated those sections. So for the first part of the fight, you have to just shoot him so that his eyeball pops out, and then you just shoot his eyeball. If we're still just using the bow to shoot him here, then what purpose does even having that weak spot serve? It doesn't make the fight any more interesting. Then he'll sink the platform and we have to do the rest of the fight as Zora Link, which could have been cool if they hadn't completely nerfed the Zora swimming. Instead, there's these mines which you need to trick him into swallowing like some sort of underwater King Dodongo fight. I can see what they were going for, but this is so awkward to do, and these mines detonate too easily, so you're just as likely to take damage yourself. I so don't understand how they got these two boss fights so backwards with each other. So yeah, the 3DS version continues to disappoint me. If you like it, I don't hold any hard feelings towards you, but to me this is all so counterintuitive. In both versions, he'll go down after enough hits and shrink down and sort of just pop. We get our heart container, recover George's remains, and we're out of here. We briefly see the third giant, and while Tattle pleads with him that we need their support, the giant simply replies, "Help our friend," which Tattle assumes means the fourth giant, but that's not quite what he meant. More on that another time. Great Bay is at peace again. The turtle can sleep, and the band is back together. Don't forget to turn in those stray fairies to get your upgraded defense in the form of the outlined hearts, which come at a much better time here rather than being halfway through Ganon's castle. So that's the dungeon. While Great Bay Temple has a pretty harsh reputation, I personally never found it to be as hard as, say, the Water Temple. Following the color-coded doors and pipes really help with that navigational challenge, especially when you consider that you really only have to take it on one half at a time. It may seem daunting, but using Link's Zora abilities, in the N64 version at least, combined with some really creative puzzles in which you use both fire and ice arrows in tandem, make this one of the most interesting water-themed dungeons in Zelda history. Also, the overpowered freedom of being able to make ice platforms anywhere is one of the best uses of ice arrows in the entire series, and like I said, feels like the precursor to Breath of the Wild's Cryonis rune. Of course, it's not perfect. Some nitpicks I have. The game would have greatly benefited from either Wind Waker's or Breath of the Wild system of switching arrow types. Having to pause to equip fire and ice arrows over and over can be tedious, not unlike the tedious feeling of equipping the Iron Boots in Ocarina of Time. Meanwhile, those games allow you to switch arrow types really quickly without pausing, and that would have gone a long way here. I also feel like the game is at times too generous with its item pickups. There are so many pots and crates with magic and arrows, and in some cases, in addition to those, are choo-choos that will continuously respawn with those pickups. In a room like the one with the seesaw puzzle, I appreciate that due to just how much magic power that one puzzle consumes, even if done perfectly. But in pretty much any other room, it feels a little too heavy-handed. I'm not saying there should be no item pickups whatsoever, but tone it down a bit, guys. If they're going to negate the risk of running out whatsoever, then why even bother having a limit to your arrows or magic at all? But hey, that's me. I'm pretty much always looking for more challenge in my Zelda games, so maybe you guys feel like it removes some of the stress, or you feel differently about it, that's okay. Of course, I played this on the N64, and I think the 3DS's nerfed swimming makes the dungeon that much worse. The fluidity of your movements feels so good in the original, and that good feeling counterbalances the stress of traversing these narrow corridors and solving puzzles. It's a balance. The new swimming is just so awful that it adds to the stress on top of the navigation, rather than relieving that stress, leading to an overall worse time. I know I keep ragging on the remake, but it makes me so sad to see something so wonderful be stripped down and left to die. Because of this, I have to give the dungeon 2 separate ratings. Overall, despite the dungeon's challenges, because of all the cool stuff it does in the original, I actually really like it. In the remake, however, because they nerfed the swimming, and they nerfed the ice arrows, and then they made the boss fight boring and awkward, I actively dislike it, which is saying a lot because I even openly like the Water Temple. But hey, that's just me. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for when the next one comes out. Just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to the lovely people who supported me on Patreon. In particular, those who supported at the cheese tier or higher, which includes Tetra, Brenda, Callie, Justin, and Finley. Thank you so much, you guys, for the support, and I will catch you all next time. Bye bye!